Ukrainian forces destroy Russian ATV column near Pokrovsk. Footage, January 04, 2026. That headline, just a few days into the new year, isn't really a report on a single battle. It's more like a grim summary of the tactical reality right now on the Donetsk front. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex. Join me and my co-host, Aurea, for the latest deep dive from Defense Report. Today we're doing a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of what's happening around the key town of Pokrovsk.
Our mission today is to really unpack this one incident, the total annihilation of a Russian light vehicle column, and show you how it's not a one-off. It's the latest proof of a huge tactical failure for Russian forces. We're going to show you why it's failing.
And that's the real cliffhanger here, isn't it? The systemic nature of it. Russian command has effectively traded its expensive heavy armor, tanks and IFVs, for these huge numbers of cheap, incredibly vulnerable light vehicles, ATVs, motorcycles.
The result has been catastrophic for them. High personnel losses with almost zero tactical success.
It's being called the dead end of their current offensive template.
Exactly. And the reason for that is what we're really digging into. Ukraine's highly coordinated unmanned systems forces. They are turning the battlefield into what we call a kill web, and it's making any kind of mechanized maneuver just impossible for the Russians.
Okay, let's start with that headline incident. The destruction of that ATV column on January 4th by the 25th Separate Airborne Siegeslav Brigade. The fact that it's happening in 2026 tells you this isn't some failed experiment from last year.
Right. It means Russian command still sees this as their only real option. But what's fascinating is how quickly Ukrainian forces just neutralize these new plans. The 25th Brigade said the Russians are constantly devising new plans, but they're shattered instantly because of the coordination between their paratroopers and the drone operators.
So the success rate for these charges is basically zero.
Near zero over the last couple of months, yeah. They're just too visible, too fragile, they get spotted and they get hit.
And it's not like this came out of nowhere. There's a clear pattern. Just before the new year, December 30th, there was the preemptive strike.
That was a perfect example of superior intelligence. The 33rd Mechanized Brigade didn't even wait for the assault to start. They spotted the column forming up near Volodymyrivka.
So still behind their own lines.
Exactly, while it was still getting organized. FTV pilots and artillery just dismantled the entire operation before it even left the staging area. 5 ATVs gone, infantry eliminated. All for nothing.
A completely wasted effort. Then you have the December 10th assault, where they tried to use the weather as a shield.
A classic miscalculation. They saw heavy, wet snowfall and thought, great, this will ground the Ukrainian recon drones. They figured their fast, light vehicles would have a window.
But they were wrong.
They were completely wrong. The Typhoon UAV unit kept flying. The column of motorcycles and quad bikes was stopped, incinerated, and then the Typhoon unit switched tactics. They started using bomber drones to drop explosives directly on the infantry that were scattering into the woods.
So there was no escape.
None. They eliminated all the equipment and engaged every single person in that assault. It shows that whether it's in the planning stage or using weather for cover, Ukraine's drone surveillance just predetermines the outcome.
So let's zoom out. Why? Why is Russia willing to endure these kinds of systematic, televised losses? What makes Pokrovsk so important that they're just burning through soldiers like this?
Because Pokrovsk is arguably the most vital strategic prize in the entire Donetsk region right now. It's a logistical linchpin, a classic one.
The roads and railways all meet there.
All of them. It's the junction that feeds the entire defensive line north, up to the big fortified cities like Krematorsk and Sloviansk. If Russia takes Pokrovsk, it doesn't just win a town. It compromises the entire defensive architecture of eastern Ukraine.
It would force a massive Ukrainian withdrawal.
A massive, very costly one. That's the prize they're aiming for.
But the cost to get there. The numbers we're seeing from the Ukrainian General Staff for 2025 are just staggering.
It's attrition warfare on a scale we haven't seen in a very long time. The data suggests Russian forces took around 416,570 casualties in 2025 alone.
400,000.
But here's the number that really tells the story. When you break it down by territory seized, they averaged 78 casualties for every single square kilometer they took.
78 soldiers for 1 square kilometer. That's almost unbelievable. It's the number you'd expect from, I don't know, a World War I battle, not a year-long campaign.
And in the Pokrovsk sector specifically, it's even more intense. Over 7,000 Russian personnel were eliminated there in just the last 5 months. And for all that cost, their advance slowed dramatically in December. It completely fell off after a peak in November.
So the high cost isn't even buying them speed. The defense is working.
It is. They've infiltrated parts of Pokrovsk, maybe around 67% of the wider area, mostly in the east and south. But that's not control. Ukrainian forces hold the northern and western districts and, critically, the main supply lines into the city. It's an infiltration, not an occupation.
Which brings us back to the tactics, the high cost to limited gains. Why did they switch? Why abandon heavy armor for what are essentially recreational vehicles, these Desert Cross 1000 ATVs?
It was a direct, and I would say desperate response to the FTV drone threat. Their tanks and IFVs just became giant, slow-moving targets. So the logic for switching rested on 3 main points.
Okay.
First, a reduced signature. A smaller vehicle has a smaller thermal and visual profile. Harder to spot, in theory.
In theory.
Second, saturation tactics. The idea was to throw, say, 20 cheap quads at the line, hoping that maybe 1 or 2 with key personnel might get through the drone net, overwhelm the defenders.
And a third.
Terrain adaptability. These ATVs are much better in the forest belts and especially in the Resputitsa, that deep seasonal mud that just swallows heavy track vehicles.
So they traded armor for what they hoped would be stealth and speed? But that Dobrapilly assault proves it was a failed bet.
A catastrophically failed bet.
Yeah.
Because reduced signature does not mean invisible. These things offer zero protection against fragments, let alone direct fire.
And that battle, on December 22nd, was the proof.
The absolute proof. The 155th and 40th Naval Infantry Brigades. The Ukrainians deployed a layered defense artillery, mines, FPV drones, and the geolocated footage confirmed it. They destroyed 10 out of the 11 ATVs in that one attack.
A 91% loss rate.
In a single engagement. It's unsustainable.
And that gets to the psychological side of this. All of this is being filmed. The drone footage of these burning columns is everywhere. People are comparing it to the death road out of Kuwait from 1991.
That analogy resonates because it's about a completely one-sided slaughter caught on camera. It confirms the perception, even among some pro-Russian military bloggers, that this is a desperate and suboptimal tactic. They were furious after December 22nd, criticizing their own commanders for ordering these daylight assaults onto a battlefield under, and I'm quoting here, total surveillance.
So let's talk about that total surveillance, the Ukrainian kill web. How are they integrating everything so effectively? What does that term even mean in practice?
Think of it like a nervous system. Every sensor, every drone, every artillery piece is connected in real time. For the December 22nd attack, the response was a textbook example of this web in action.
A layered response.
Perfectly layered. Deep strikes from artillery hit their staging areas. Then, landmines and FPV drones took out the lead-armored vehicles to stop the column. And finally, strike drones and loitering munitions went after the unprotected ATVs and infantry one by one.
And that requires a central brain, right? It's not just different units doing their own thing.
It has to be centrally organized. They have unified command centers, like the Rubicon Coordination Center, that acts as that brain. It takes the real-time intel from recon units like Magyar's birds and immediately translates it into a fire mission. The time from seeing a target to destroying it is getting shorter and shorter.
But the Russians adapt too. We're hearing about fiber-optic FPV drones now, which are supposedly immune to jamming.
That's a serious escalation. A normal FPV uses a radio link, which can be jammed. A fiber-optic drone, though, spools out a physical, hair-thin wire behind it, connecting it to the operator.
So it can't be jammed.
Completely immune. And they can have ranges up to 20 kilometers, which threatens logistics deep behind Ukrainian lines.
So how do you stop something you can't jam?
You have to hit it physically. Ukrainian forces are using what they call kinetic interception. They launched their own high-speed FPV drones with the specific mission of ramming the Russian recon drones out of the sky.
So drone dogfights.
Literally, high-speed, unmanned dogfights where the goal is a mid-air collision. It's a whole new kind of warfare.
Ironically, the very weather the Russians thought would help them is now a vulnerability.
Yes, it completely backfired. A Ukrainian spokesperson pointed out that frost and snow actually make reconnaissance easier. That cold ground makes heat signatures from engines or even people just glow on thermal optics. It turns the entire landscape into a high-contrast backdrop.
So looking into 2026, what does this all mean for the Pokrovsk front?
It suggests Ukraine is shifting its posture. They're moving from just holding the line to what they're calling counter-assault operations. They're using the high Russian attrition to build up their own reserves and are now aiming to actively push Russian forces out of those areas they've infiltrated.
And those infiltrators are hard to supply. We heard the TO-515 highway is under constant watch.
Constant. Sources mention up to 350 Ukrainian FPV drones targeting that one supply route every single day. You can't sustain an offensive when every truck you send is a potential loss.
And then there's the information war running alongside all of this.
Right. While this is happening on the ground, you have Russian propagandists like Vladimir Solovyov on state TV claiming the complete occupation of Pokrovsk back in December.
A claim that was very quickly and very visually debunked.
Immediately. Ukrainian forces released drone footage of one of their drones flying into the northern district and simply knocking over a Russian flag someone had planted there. It was a direct message. You can sneak in, but you can't hold it. The footage proves the reality.
The systematic destruction of these light vehicle columns around Pokrovsk confirms a huge lesson, really, for anyone watching this conflict. Superior battlefield awareness, driven by this drone kill web, makes conventional offensives almost obsolete against a determined, tech-savvy defense.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to consider. If these high-cost, light-mobility tactics are failing so badly, what does Russian command do next? How do they seize the open ground between cities like Pokrovsk and Kramatorsk? They can't just rely on small infantry groups in urban ruins forever.
So what's the next adaptation?
Exactly. Will they find some new way to counter Ukraine's thermal and visual dominance? Or is the only option left to revert to something even worse? Mass, unprotected infantry attacks against an enemy who can see their every move.
You've been listening to Defense Report, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.